The cold morning light invaded the stained glass windows of the Whitmore mansion with a biting silence, reflecting off the white marble as if everything there were made of ice. In the center of the main room, enveloped in the luxury that never belonged to her, a woman in a blue uniform held a baby in her arms with trembling hands. The cry of little Noah, loud and desperate, seemed to echo on the walls like a cry for help. But it was enough for her to wrap him around her chest and murmur in a choked voice, "Mommy's here," for him to stop crying. She was Karen, a simple, silent cleaning lady with sunken eyes and a wounded soul. No one there knew his story. No one knew the pain she carried in her bones. But in that instant, as the baby clung to her with an almost instinctive desperation, there was something different in the air. Something that neither time nor money nor the golden walls of that house could hide. How many women have lost everything, and yet they continue to stand, invisible in the midst of the brightness of others? What that cleaning lady hid in her chest was greater than the pain. It was a truth buried alive, and when it comes to light, nothing will be left in place. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. There is a moment that changes everything, a scene that still chills those who saw it up close. It was when that simple woman, without jewelry, without power, without anything, with only his worn uniform and his heart in pieces, he took the millionaire boss's baby in his arms and, in a whisper, silenced a cry that no one could calm. The baby was silent, as if there in that poor and forgotten lap he found what not even the golden cradles of the mansion could offer. But why did he only sleep with her? Why did that boy stop screaming just at the cleaning lady's touch? The answer lies behind a secret that has been smothered for an entire year. A secret capable of destroying an entire family, exposing hidden crimes, and giving back to a mother what they took from her. If this story touches your heart, if at some point you feel like it could be you there, holding on to the pain and being judged for existing, so I ask you, with all respect, leave your support here, sign up, because telling this story is more than remembering. It is doing justice for so many who were silenced. We will go together until the end. The electronic gate of the Whitmore mansion opened with a metallic hiss, revealing a flawless garden where no leaf dared to fall out of place. Karen got off the bus with her old backpack on her back, her shoes worn out and her hands hidden inside the sleeves of her coat as if she could hide what she felt there too. The cold of Greenwich cut through her skin, but it didn't hurt as much as the absence she carried on her chest. Every step toward the house was a mixture of fear and hope. It was her first day there, another job as a cleaner, another rich house, another chance to survive. The main door opened before she rang the doorbell. A blonde woman, her face impeccably made up even at 8 in the morning, looked up and down and just said, "Karen, right? Come in." It was Robin Whitmore, young, cold, with quick gestures and an impatient look. She held a glass of detox juice as if holding the world. Without giving time for answers, he turned his back and walked away, leaving Karen alone in the entrance hall, surrounded by marble columns, signed paintings, and huge mirrors that reflected the simple uniform she wore, as if shouting, "You don't belong here." The housekeeper, Martha, appeared next. Older, with a firm manner but discreetly welcoming eyes, she handed Karen a list of tasks: cleaning the upstairs bathrooms, organizing the linen closets, and avoiding the nursery. "You don't like anyone to come in without permission?" Karen nodded gratefully. He didn't say much. Her Latin accent and low voice always drew attention, and she preferred not to be noticed. Since losing her husband and the rest, she learned to live in silence. Climbing the stairs, she passed through long corridors, covered with Persian rugs and with cameras in every corner. Everything seemed so expensive that even the air weighed down. But it was on the 3rd floor that the mansion seemed most suffocating. There was the nursery. The door was white with the name Noah carved in gold. A high-pitched, insistent cry echoed from within. It was a cry that crossed the walls and seemed to carry anguish, hunger, loneliness. Karen stopped. For a moment something inside her turned. It was just a crying baby, but for some reason it moved her in a way she couldn't explain. She walked away, trying to ignore it, but the sound continued, and no one seemed to do anything. At the end of the day, when he was cleaning the guest room next to the nursery, the door opened forcefully. The nanny left carrying Noah in her arms, exhausted, snorting. "This boy only cries. Nothing calms down." "I've tried everything," he said, as if complaining about a mechanical problem. Upon noticing Karen, the nanny held out the baby. "Hold here. I need to get the medicine in my bag." Karen hesitated. It had been a long time since I held a baby. "Provided," but his arms moved on their own. She received him with delicacy, and the moment little Noah touched her chest, the crying stopped. He didn't just stop, he snuggled up. He leaned his face against her neck and let out a deep sigh, as if finally finding what he was looking for. The nanny froze. "My God! He never did that. Not even with me. Not even with his mother." Karen didn't answer. His eyes were teary. She felt the warmth of her little body in her arms, her racing heart beating against hers. For a moment, everything around him disappeared. The whole world seemed to fit into that silence. She closed her eyes and, inside, imploded. Because that feeling, that touch, that smell, it was the same. It was like before. He was like Miguel. And at that moment came a pain that no words in the world can explain. The pain of a mother who lost. The pain of a woman who could never bury her son properly, who was called crazy for screaming that something was wrong, who had to shut up and move on. The pain of those who carry a grief that they cannot tell, an emptiness that no one recognizes. If you've ever felt something like this, that absence that screams inside, that silent certainty that something has been stolen from you, comment here. It says, "I believe," or "It touched me," because sometimes we just need to know that we are not alone. The nanny took the baby back, still stunned. Noah began to cry again. But Karen already knew that something had changed. It wasn't just instinct. It was more than that. It was as if that baby recognized her. The rest of the day passed slowly, stuffy, with Robin appearing and disappearing like a fragrant shadow. Ethan, the husband, appeared only once, leaving in a hurry with his cell phone glued to his ear. Tall, elegant, but absent. He didn't even look at his son. Karen kept every detail, the silence of man, the contempt of women, the baby's crying, the moment he fell silent in her arms. All of this drew a question that did not want to be silenced. What really happened at the birth of that boy? And why did her heart say that this was no coincidence? The kitchen clock was 5:43 a.m. when Karen finished rubbing the same baseboard in the dining room for the third time, as Robin had ordered. "It doesn't even leave a shred of dust. The foundation's visit comes tomorrow, and I don't want it to look like maids live in here," he had said with a cynical smile on his thin lips. Karen just nodded with her head down, holding the bucket of hot water that was already starting to cool. The day before, Robin had ordered her to clean the chandelier on the stairs with a toothbrush. In the other, he would take and iron all the sheets on the guest floor, even with no expected visits. The orders didn't come with shouting, they came with indifference, which hurt more. As if Karen were a stain on the noble floor, something that you don't look into the eyes, you just remove it. Hannah, the nanny, watched everything from a distance. Young, blonde, always dressed in designer clothes, and a light lipstick on her lips, she disguised her contempt with sharp kindnesses. "You work well, Karen. But maybe you're trying too hard to look indispensable, you know," she said one afternoon, as Karen washed the dishes. "Here, people notice when someone tries to climb steps that are not theirs." Karen just wiped her hands on the cloth and replied with a dry smile, "I'm not trying to climb anything. I'm just trying to stay." But Hannah knew. She knew that the baby only slept on the cleaning lady's lap. She knew that, even in silence, Karen's presence was stealing a space that was once hers. Ethan, the father, appeared from time to time. Tall, with brown hair always neatly combed, he walked around the house with his gaze lost in his cell phone, talking about actions, meetings, contracts. With Karen, he was polite, even kind, but distant. He never looked her in the eye for more than 2 seconds. It was as if he avoided recognizing something or someone. Karen tried to keep a low profile. She avoided going up when she was not called. He walked with lighter steps than usual. But inevitably, fate insisted on putting her in front of Noah. And every time her arms wrapped around him, the world seemed to suspend its air for an instant. The baby calmed down, looked at her with attentive eyes, as if he expected something from her, something that no one else could give. One night, after midnight, the intercom in the employees' room rang urgently. It was Martha, the housekeeper. "Mrs. Robin asked you to go to the baby's room. He got sick. He threw up everything. And the nanny, well, it came out early today. Karen didn't even change her clothes. She went up barefoot, with her hair tied in a crooked bun, still with her apron tied around her waist. When she entered the nursery, the light of the lamp flickered. The carpet was stained with vomit, and the acidic smell permeated the air. In the crib, Noah writhed, moaning softly. He was sweaty, shaky. There was a blanket thrown on the floor and no clean diaper nearby. Karen ran to him, took him in her arms and felt the warmth of her feverish little body. "Shh, it's okay, my love. Mommy's here." The sentence escaped without her noticing. But the baby, hearing her, nestled tightly in her lap, her eyes wide, her sigh deep, her little head leaning against her chest. Karen sat on the floor, with him in her arms. He didn't think about protocol, orders, cameras. At that moment, she just wanted to calm that pain. Because something about her was hurting too, and it hurt just as much. She looked around. The nursing chair was leaning against a corner, full of bags, the dirty bottles in the corner of the sink. Everything indicated negligence disguised as wealth. And it was there, in the silence of that early morning, that Karen cried for the first time since she arrived at that house. She cried for Noah. She cried for Miguel. She cried for all the nights she spent with empty arms and her heart full of questions. Holding Noah to her chest, she felt her little body relax, and the crying stopped. The baby's breathing returned to the quiet rhythm, almost in sync with his heart. And then, in an almost soundless whisper, she thought, "Why do you only rest with me, my son?" It was just a thought, or a memory, that the body insisted on reliving. In the morning, as Karen discreetly left the room, she crossed paths with Hannah in the hallway. The nanny looked her up and down and blurted out, with a crooked smile, "Funny, it feels like you're trying to be a mother again, right?" Karen stopped. He took a deep breath. He did not answer, because I knew that somewhere inside that house there was a truth much greater than the poison of that sentence. But how far does the silence of a mother who has lost everything go? And what happens when instinct starts screaming louder than fear? Dawn fell heavy on Greenwich, with a fine rain beating on the windows, as if to wash away the sins hidden in that mansion. Karen climbed the service stairs with her shoulders hunched, feeling on her back not only the fatigue of the day, but an older, deeper weight, the kind of weight that you don't see, but that lives stuck to your soul. In the cramped room of the employees, tucked into the attic, she sat on the edge of the single bed, turned on the yellowish lamp, and, with slow hands, opened the brown suitcase she kept under the mattress. Inside, between old cloths and a rosary of wood, was a worn photo, crumpled in the corners, as if time had tried to erase it. It was Miguel, your child. In the image, he wore a light blue jumpsuit and smiled with open gums, with his eyes slanted that closed with laughter. She ran her fingers over the boy's face, as if caressing a living memory, as if she could still smell the warm milk he left on her neck. Karen closed her eyes and was taken back to the mornings in the Bronx. The sun poured into the small apartment through the broken window, and she put Miguel in the sling close to his chest, going out for a walk in Van Cortlandt Park. She remembered lying with him on the grass, counting the clouds in the sky and singing songs she made up on the spot. She remembered when he started saying "mama" between one laugh and another. It was all so simple and so real, until the day that life took it away from her. Miguel was born at Lincoln Hospital after a birth full of errors and silences. She screamed in pain, and no one came. When she finally entered the delivery room, they said that the child needed observation. They sent her to rest. Hours later, they warned that the baby had died from respiratory complications. Karen never saw the body. He never held the dead boy in his arms. He never received a death certificate. When he asked for the medical records, they said that there was a registration error, that the papers had disappeared. When she screamed, they said she was confused, shaken. When he insisted, they said it was better to move on, but she never succeeded. Since that day, Karen has been cleaning houses in silence. I washed bathrooms, crying inside. She swallowed her scream as she polished silverware from families who would never know what she experienced. Each child he saw rekindled the wound, but none like Noah. With him, the smell was the same, the way to bend your little fingers. Even the crying, it was as if she had heard it before, in another life. Miguel's picture was still in her hands when she knelt on the icy floor of the room and began to pray. It was not a memorized prayer. It was an intimate, broken conversation, full of pauses and sighs. My God, if the Lord has left me standing this far, it is because he still has something to show. I don't understand what's going on, but if this boy has come from you into my life again, don't let them take him away from me again. Don't let it. No. There, in that hidden attic, she made a silent promise. I didn't know what was coming, but he knew he wouldn't let another child suffer like Miguel did, even if he had to face the world to do so. And then something inside her began to change. It was no longer just work. It was no longer just survival. It was as if an old voice was breathing again, as if the love they once snatched from her arms had found a way back. But what if the coincidence wasn't a coincidence? What if the pain she felt when looking at Noah was actually a warning that the truth was much closer than she imagined? The next few days passed like fog for Karen. Every step inside the mansion was watched. Every gesture was measured, as if the air there had become denser, more dangerous. The silence among the employees grew, and the mansion, although grandiose, looked like a theater where each character pretended something, except her. Karen didn't pretend anything. She only carried in her eyes an old pain and a tenderness that escaped even when she tried to hide it. She avoided the nursery as Robin had ordered, but it was enough to hear Noah's cry through the corridors for her chest to tighten. The boy cried insistently, inconsolably, as if he was looking for something that no one could offer. The nanny, annoyed by the boss's disapproving looks, began to throw hints at breakfast in the hallway, even in front of Martha. There are people here who don't understand their place. A cleaning lady wanting to be a mother. Soon he wants my position. Karen lowered her head. He knew that any word of his could be distorted, but it hurt, because it wasn't about positions. It was not envy, nor ambition. It was something that came from the womb, something you don't choose to feel. It was the blood screaming. One grey afternoon, while polishing the family's cutlery in the dining room, he heard footsteps coming from the office. The half-open door let out muffled voices. Ethan was talking to someone, a man with a firm voice. Lawyer, perhaps. "About the medical record. Are you sure no one will track it?" asked Ethan. "Everything was sealed judicially. That woman will not be able to prove anything," replied the other. "She'll never know what we've done." Karen froze. He felt the cloth slip from his hand, fall to the ground as if the world had sunk with him. That sentence entered her chest like an icy blade. "She'll never know what we've done." The pain in the back of her neck was immediate, the cold sweat, the heart racing. She retreated without making a sound, but inside her everything screamed. What had they done? What was that medical record? And who was she? The wife? Another woman? Or would it be her? That night, Karen took a long time to sleep. She curled up in bed as she did when she was a child, hugging Miguel's photo. His heart beat with a mixture of fear and intuition. Something in that house was wrong. Something in that child, in that story. She turned on her side, staring at the peeling wall. She thought about the phrase, the way Noah hugged her, the crying that only stopped in her arms. He thought about the questions that no one answered in the hospital, the papers that never existed, the pitying looks of the doctors. What if it had all been a mistake? Or worse, what if it had been on purpose? She followed in silence, carrying that weight that no one saw. And if you're following this story right now, feeling touched by all this, leave a like and subscribe. It is the most beautiful way to show that this pain has not gone unnoticed, because when a poor woman speaks softly, the world usually ignores her. But today, she needs to be heard. The next day, Karen went downstairs to the laundry room and found Hannah laughing on the phone. When he saw Karen, he made a point of speaking loudly. "She's getting attached to the baby. Can that? Cleaning lady thinking she's a mother. It's crossing the line." Then he hung up and launched the final blow. "All that's left is to want to take it home, but this is not a soap opera." Karen pretended she didn't hear, but inside the heart throbbed. The baby was a lump stuck in her throat, a living memory, an unanswered question. And then, one morning when the mansion was still asleep, Karen quietly climbed to the nursery to leave a forgotten toy in the next room. The door was leaning against it. Noah cried again. No one around. She hesitated. But when she heard him choke on tears, she couldn't resist. He pushed the door carefully. He approached the crib and stretched out his arms. Noah threw himself at her as if waiting for her, as if he knew she would come. Karen hugged him and whispered, "Calm down, my love. Mommy's here." At the same moment, the crying stopped. But when she turned to put the baby back in, she saw Robin standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, and a look of pure venom. What Karen didn't know. It's just that at that very moment, a decision was already being made against her. And this time, it could cost more than the job. It could cost her the only truth that still kept her alive. The mansion was spotless that Saturday morning. Robin oversaw every detail with the tension of someone who adorns a house of cards. Expensive flower arrangements, bowls lined up to the millimeter, uniformed waiters paraded between golden columns. It was a day to receive international investors. The local press would do a little coverage. Nothing could go wrong, not with the Whitmore name at stake. Karen, as always, was there, discreet, assigned to clean toilets and refill towels. She had been instructed by Martha not to circulate through the social floors during the event. Robin had been clear, no cleaning lady in sight. But upstairs, Noah was crying. He started quietly, like a restless grumble. But soon the sound grew, cutting through the air like a razor. Karen, who was organizing the sheet storage, felt her whole body react. He tried to restrain himself. He looked to the sides. No one went up. No nanny, no housekeeper. The crying became high-pitched, as if screaming for someone. She couldn't stand it. He ran down the stairs, crossing the corridor towards the main hall from where the sound was already audible. Downstairs, between floral arrangements and forced smiles, the guests began to look at each other. Robin pretended to be calm, but her fingers trembled as she held the glass of champagne. Ethan, leaning against the wall, watched in silence. The baby was crying in the adjoining nursery, and the sound echoed through the house like a fire siren. That's when Karen showed up, without thinking, without asking. She entered the social room, walked through the middle of the guests, her simple uniform at odds with the expensive suits and dresses, and went straight to the nursery. The nanny was in the bathroom, the cradle empty. Noah lying on the carpet, his arms wavy, his little face red from crying. Karen took him gently in her arms. At the same moment, the baby fell silent. He leaned his face against her neck and let out a long, relieved sigh. The silence that formed in the hall was even greater than the crying that had previously taken him. They all looked at the door of the nursery, from where Karen emerged with Noah in her arms. The scene was absurdly moving. Some guests smiled, others commented, "Look at that, how he loves this woman." But Robin Whitmore didn't see tenderness. She saw a threat. He saw control slipping through his fingers. She saw a cleaning lady stealing her place, not just from her mother, but from the lady of the house. With steady steps and sparkling eyes, she advanced towards Karen. The cup fell from his hand and shattered on the ground. The high-pitched sound of the broken glass cut through the charm of the moment. "Are you crazy?" she shouted in the middle of the room. "Who gave you permission to touch my son? You're nothing but a maid, a sassy maid, that you think you can invade any space because the baby likes the poor lap you have." The silence turned into shock. Karen stood still with Noah in her arms, her eyes filled with tears, not out of fear but out of helplessness. "Leave him now," ordered Robin, "and I left my house. Now. It is suspended, and if you come back here before I send you to, you'll be gone forever." Karen handed Noah to Martha, who had hurriedly appeared, and walked to the door. He felt the looks burning his back. I knew that the cameras had recorded everything. But that wasn't what hurt. Contempt hurt. It hurt the name that was thrown at him. It hurt that, even though she did good, she was always treated as a threat. At the bus stop, hugging her own body, she breathed with difficulty. The Greenwich air seemed colder, thinner. When the bus arrived, it went up slowly. He sat at the back. His face was still warm, wet hands. A gentleman with white hair and a felt hat sat next to him. They were silent for a few minutes. Then he said, looking out the window, "Sometimes blood speaks louder than reason." Karen turned her face to him, surprised, but the man just smiled, as if he understood without having to listen. The phrase kept echoing, like a password, like a whisper of fate. That night, she didn't sleep. He spent hours looking at Miguel's photo, and for the first time, he searched for Robin's profile on the internet. He scoured dates. He read social columns. He found out that Noah had been born on February 7th of the previous year. It was the same day that in that public hospital in the Bronx, they said that Miguel had died. Karen's heart raced as if she had heard a scream. That could not be a coincidence. But what if it wasn't? What if she had held her own son in her arms and didn't know it? On that rainy morning, Karen still felt numb from humiliation. The uniform folded in the corner of the bed seemed to weigh more than the entire body. She hadn't been back to the Whitmore mansion since Robin's outburst, and the silence coming from Martha, the nanny, everyone, was deafening. But inside her, something had awakened, and it was no longer just sadness. It was restlessness. It was the feeling that the line between past and present was breaking, and when she opened the door of the little room, ready to go down and face another aimless day, she almost stepped on the envelope. It was brown, simple, without a sender. Only her handwritten name in fine handwriting, Karen. She looked around, but the hallway was empty. He picked up the envelope carefully and closed the door before opening it. His hands trembled. Inside, there was a sheet folded into 3 parts and a second printed sheet. The letter's paper bore fingerprints, as if it had been written in haste. She read, her eyes scurrying between words as her breath began to fail. "You are closer to the truth than you realize. The birth that took away her child. It involved many more people than you were told. You're not crazy. He didn't die. Follow the trail of the hospital." Karen's heart stopped for a second. Then he started beating him hard again, as if he wanted to tear his chest. She looked at the second leaf. It was an email copy. It had the headline of an exchange between Ethan Whitmore and an obstetrician at Lincoln Hospital. Date, February 7th. Subject, private emergency, confidential. The message read, "Thank you for all the help. She can never know. I have already transferred the amount. Delete everything." Karen couldn't breathe. That wasn't just a message. It was the spark of something much bigger. She read and reread, trying to take it all in. What did Ethan do in the same hospital where she had lost Michael? What was this emergency? And who could not know what? She spent the day looking for information. He used a public computer at the municipal library, trying to access old archives, obituaries, news of the time. He discovered that Robin had experienced serious complications in childbirth, and that the baby, a boy, had supposedly been stillborn. But the birth and death records had conflicting dates. On one page, it said that the baby was born alive. In another, that there was no heartbeat. The names of the doctors matched. The date was the same as Miguel's. The hospital was the same. Karen's hands were sweating over the keyboard. Your mouth dries up, the blood pulsing in his ears. Each new line she read was like a punch in the stomach, a confirmation of what she never dared to say out loud. My son didn't die. It was taken from me. And it was there, at that point in the story, that reality was no longer bearable. Because when a mother begins to suspect that her own child has been stolen, there is no more sleep, peace, or fear that prevents her from going to the end. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you also knows what this woman is experiencing goes far beyond an injustice. This story will still surprise you in a way you are not expecting. And maybe, when it all comes to light, the truth will move you more than any soap opera ending. With the documents printed in her purse and her soul on fire, Karen returned home that night with a plan she still couldn't organize. She needed proof of witnesses from actual medical records, but most of all, he needed courage. She looked up at the dark sky and muttered to herself, if it's true, I'll find out. And then, when he came to his door and tried to put the key in the lock, he heard quick footsteps behind him. She turned around, frightened. A figure ran down the side of the hallway, leaving only a whispered phrase in the air. They are watching you. Karen froze. His eyes searched for cameras, for faces, for any sign. But there was no one else there. What she didn't know was that his name was already circulating in the corridors of the mansion, and that someone very powerful was willing to do anything to prevent her from finding out what really happened in that hospital. The gate to the Whitmore mansion opened with the same metallic sound as always, but for Karen that day, it sounded like a call of fate. She walked with her head down, uniform clean, eyes steady. Martha greeted her at the entrance with a dry wave, and Robin didn't even show up. Anna looked her up and down with a mocking smile at the corner of her mouth and dropped a bucket and a to-do list in her hand. Clean the baseboards of the east stairs and no more hanging around the nursery. Understand? Karen just nodded. It was what they expected of her, silence and obedience. And that's what she would give, on the outside. Inside, every step he took was calculated. She was no longer afraid. It had a purpose. During coffee, he heard the employees whispering. Ethan had traveled to Chicago, and the house was more tense than usual. Karen took the opportunity to exchange her cell phone for an old model with automatic recording hidden in her apron pocket, and while washing the floor of the north wing, he positioned the device near the office. Hours later, he took the first recording, Hannah talking on the phone, saying that she needed to keep the cleaning lady away from the baby because there are things she can't know. Later, while scrubbing the windows on the second floor, he found Martha in the laundry room. The housekeeper folded sheets with steady hands and distant eyes. Karen approached in silence. Donna Martha, you were here the day the baby arrived, weren't you? The woman hesitated, her gaze resting on her cautiously. It was. Why? Karen took a deep breath. It's just that I have a strange feeling, a thing here. Who won't let go? Martha stopped folding. He leaned against the bench and was silent for a few seconds. Then he blurted out in a low voice, that night, Mrs. Robin gave birth, but the birth was horrible. Hemorrhage, pressure in the heights. She fainted and only came to her senses 2 days later. The entire hospital on alert. Karen felt a shiver. And the baby? Martha looked to the sides before answering. He was taken by a private security guard. They said it was for exams, but I saw it. He left with a cooler, and he returned only at the end of the next day. When Mrs. Robin woke up, the baby was already there, clean, healthy, sleeping in her husband's arms, and no one ever said anything else. Karen felt her legs soften. He had to hold onto the bench to avoid falling. It was as if Martha's every word was a key opening the door to truth. She couldn't answer. I didn't know whether to cry or scream, and sometimes the deepest pain is not the one that screams. It is the one that silences, suffocates, hides behind the eyes of those who continue walking. How many women have carried questions they could never ask out loud? If you've ever felt this muffled pain, this knot that doesn't untie, write here in the comments, I understand. I've been through this. I got emotional. Because when the truth is denied, all we have left is feeling. Karen came out of the laundry room teary-eyed. He needed more, of documents, of records. He decided to observe every corner of the house with new eyes. He noticed that Ethan kept briefcases in the office safe. He wrote down the code he typed in attentively one morning, Lo217, the date of Noah's birth, and maybe of Miguel. In the evening, she saw Hannah leave in a hurry to answer a call from Robin. The nursery was empty. Karen entered slowly. The baby was sleeping, the same nose, the little hands, the little mouth ajar. She knelt beside the crib and, for the first time, whispered, Michael. The baby shifted in his sleep, as if he had recognized it. That's when the door creaked. Karen stood up, startled. Martha was there. He said nothing, but his look said it all. And there, in that silence between two women who knew more than they could say, an invisible alliance was born. But what Karen didn't know yet was that someone was watching her from the other side of the cameras, and that, by discovering the safe code, she would not only open the past, but also risk her life. The night seemed to have engulfed the streets of Greenwich as Karen stepped off the bus, her shoulders hunched and her soul exhausted. The rich city slept surrounded by expensive lights, but wherever she stepped, the streetlights failed, and the sounds were of footsteps echoing by themselves. He walked quickly, clutching the worn bag to his chest, where he now hid copies of the documents he had been collecting in secret. Martha had discreetly given him a medical record with stamps that had disappeared from the hospital archives, and inside the vault she saw what she never imagined. Noah's birth certificate, filled out by hand, without the signature of the biological mother. But it was when he turned the corner of 32nd Street that he felt it. A black, silent car was stopped on the other side, the headlights off, and even without seeing anyone, he felt the gaze. He sharpened his pace. The cell phone rang. Unknown number. He answered with trembling hands. "You're digging your own grave, cleaning lady." The voice was masculine, deep, muffled, and hung up before she could say anything. Karen froze. He stopped for a second in the middle of the sidewalk. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. All I could think about was the baby. If Noah is really Miguel, someone is willing to do anything to hide this truth. He entered the house and locked everything. He didn't sleep. She spent the night leaning against the door with a kitchen knife by her side. The next day, he arrived at the mansion early, before the first round. I needed to pretend normality, but when he opened his locker in the locker room, he felt the floor disappear under his feet. Everything was turned upside down, your clothes thrown away, your papers scattered, and the worst, Miguel's photo, the one she had kept since the empty burial, was gone. His hands trembled. She fell to her knees, rummaging through the corners of the closet. Nothing. Robin walked down the hallway and looked at her with that icy smile. "Trouble, Karen." The voice had poison. Karen stood up slowly, swallowing her anger. "Someone messed with my things." "Ah, what a strange thing, isn't it? I thought that the cleaning lady knew how to take care of what is hers." And he left, leaving in the air a phrase that seemed more of a threat than a mockery. Shortly after, Hannah appeared screaming, holding a briefcase in her hands. "The office documents were moved. Who went in there? The key is gone." And turning to Karen, "The only one who is prowling that corridor is you. You think you're going to move up in life, right?" Karen was silent, not because she had no answer, but because anything she said would be used against her. Ethan passed by, heard the commotion, but went straight. The look was different, nervous, guilty, but it still emits. Throughout the day, Karen was kept away from the nursery, and Noah, as if in perfect reflex, cried for hours. Nothing calmed him, neither lap, nor songs, nor toys. The baby was trembling. He sucked his fingers with anguish. He seemed to feel her absence as if he were short of air. At night, already in the room, Karen knelt on the cold floor. He lit the candle he always carried in his suitcase. She took the copy of the medical record and placed it next to Miguel's photo, the last copy she had, hidden in the lining of the suitcase. And there, with her eyes closed and her voice breaking, she prayed, "Lord, if this boy is my son, it gives me courage to take the truth out of the darkness. Show me the way. It frees me from fear. I just want to know. I just want to hold my son again. I just want the truth." The wind blew through the barely closed window, extinguishing the candle flame with a sigh. And at that moment, in the corridor of the mansion, someone heard everything. Someone who shouldn't be there. Someone who had in his hands the missing piece to reveal or destroy. The nursery was shrouded in a delicate silence, as if even time was afraid of disturbing Noah's sleep. It was late afternoon, the golden light through the linen curtains and painted the floor a calm glow. Karen wiped the edges of the dresser with light movements, almost in reverence. There was no one else there. Hannah had been called to sort something out downstairs, and Martha had quietly warned her, "Now you have 20 minutes." It was all he needed. Karen approached the crib, where Noah slept peacefully, the soft face, the curled eyelashes, the gentle breathing. She had promised not to touch him. Robin enforced that rule with eyes of ice, but in that instant something inside her broke. I needed to see. I needed to be sure. With her heart pounding around her neck, she slowly pulled the baby's onesie, unbuttoning the sides. It was then that he saw it, right there in the lower abdomen, a small, slightly curved scar, thin as a thread of thread. Karen took a step back. He felt the ground spin. It was the same. Miguel was born with a rare intestinal obstruction. 3 days later, he underwent emergency surgery. The doctor, with tears in his eyes, had said that the operation had been a success and that he was stable. But hours later, they broke the news of the death. No body, no explanations. And now, there, in front of her, the same scar, the same brand, the same story that they said was over. Karen's hands began to tremble. She knelt beside the crib, her chest heaving, her face moist. He leaned his forehead against the wood as if asking forgiveness for doubting, for waiting too long, for continuing to believe. It was him. It was his son. But before he could let himself be carried away by emotion, he heard footsteps in the hallway. She got up quickly, put the baby back together with affection, and ran to the dresser, pretending to be busy. The door opened. It was Hannah. "Is the cleaning over there?" Karen smiled weakly, disguising her distress. "Almost." Hannah left, grumbling. Karen, her heart still pounding, went back to cleaning, but as he moved the dresser to dust the wall, he felt a strange creak, a snap. He looked from behind. Nothing. But when he examined the bottom of the last drawer, he noticed that the wood seemed loose. He used the tip of the spatula and forced slowly. The panel moved. Inside, folded carefully, was a yellowed paper. Karen pulled out and unfolded slowly. The note had hurried, almost illegible handwriting, but the date at the top froze his blood. February 11th, 1:17 a.m., exactly 4 days after delivery. Her baby didn't resist, but we have a chance. Ethan decided to act. Signed with the initials D.H., Dr. Harold Duncan, the same obstetrician who attended Robin. Karen took a picture, folded the note, and hid it in her bra, breathing like someone who had just come out underwater. I felt my skin tingle. Now, he had something more than intuition. I had a written test, and that changed everything. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think, because telling a truth like this requires courage, but also company. That night, Karen came home with a burning heart. There was no more room for doubt, but the question that devoured her now was another. Why did Ethan do it? Why would this man, seemingly submissive, distant, have decided to take such an extreme action? And if the doctor wrote that, what else was hidden in his files? What was behind Miguel's unconfirmed death and the miraculous resurrection of Noah? Karen knew that the next step would be the most dangerous of all. finding Dr. Harold Duncan and getting him to talk. Because only he could confirm, with all the letters, that the millionaire's baby died and that the cleaning lady's son lives. On that grey March morning, Karen walked the streets of New York City with hurried steps and watchful eyes. He had left the mansion earlier with the excuse of a doctor's appointment. In fact, she carried a small plastic envelope inside her bag, carefully sealed, containing strands of the baby's hair. Picking them up had been a challenge, a quick change of sheets in the nursery, while Martha distracted Hannah with an emergency in the pantry. Now, that envelope was the bridge between doubt and truth. He arrived at the low-key laboratory in the Harlem neighborhood. The building was old, with red bricks and a side-iron staircase. Inside, the smell of alcohol and yellowed paper still reminded her of the times when Raphael, her friend from years ago, worked night shifts by her side at the Bronx hospital. When he appeared in the hallway with his white coat and the same smile as always, Karen almost cried. "Mi hermana, how long? I need your help, but I need no one to know." Raphael read in his eyes that it was something serious. She handed over the envelope, explained everything in a low voice, the suspicion of the exchange, the note, the scar. "I just need to know, Raphael. I can't stand living without knowing it anymore." He took hold of her hand and said firmly, "Give me 48 hours. Back at the mansion, reality slammed like a door in the face. Robin, with her usual posture, elegant, cruel, and impenetrable, announced that Karen would be in observation period. That meant no nursery, no free movement around the house, no interactions beyond the basics. "It's getting overly involved with tasks that are not yours. You're a cleaner, Karen. No babysitter, nor something else." Her eyes burned with jealousy and resentment. Karen just nodded. He knew that the more he reacted, the more danger he was. But it was impossible to ignore the sound that came soon after. Noah's crying, cutting through the air of the mansion like a razor. He cried all day. "I refused to breastfeed a bottle." He rejected Hannah. He screamed as if something was missing, as if he were looking for something he didn't know how to name. Ethan showed up at the nursery in the late afternoon. His expression was different. He was restless. There were dark circles, irritation. When Robin tried to explain that the baby was just spoiled, he interrupted, "Do you remember what happened in the hospital?" "Because I remember. And every day that passes, more things stop making sense." She froze. "Are you doubting me? I'm trying to understand. The medical record disappeared. Dr. Duncan disappeared from the map, and now this baby won't stop crying for a cleaning lady. There's something wrong, Robin, very wrong." Karen heard everything from the hallway, with the floor cloth in her hands and her soul alight. That night, she couldn't sleep. He spent hours rereading the note, reviewing the photos he took of the document in the safe, remembering the weight of Noah's body when he first held it. It was the same weight, the same heat, the same smell, and sometimes the soul recognizes what the world tries to hide. If you're hearing this right now, and you've ever felt that something inside you knew before the mind understood, so follow me, because the truth has not yet come whole, but it is close, so close that it scares. On the other side of the city, Raphael analyzed the DNA with trembling hands. The system confirmed the genetic identity. The dice matched. Karen's DNA fragments matched the child's by more than 99.9%. He checked it 3 times. The result was clear. Noah was Miguel. The next morning, before he could call Karen, Raphael received an unexpected visitor, a tall man in a dark suit, claiming to be from a medical association. "I wanted to know about exams done without legal consent." He wanted access to the archives. Raphael refused. The man insisted. He said he knew about the cleaning lady at Greenwich Manor. Outside, parked in the car, the detective hired by Robin was typing on his tablet. Full name, Karen Morales. History, a child who died in childbirth. Hospital registration incomplete. Bank transfers, no suspicion. Recent contacts, Rafael Gomez. Profession, laboratory technician. Target, silent investigation. The truth was about to explode. But before Karen could get that call with the confirmation of the exam, something happened in the mansion. Noah is gone. The nanny freaked out. The police were called. Ethan screamed. Robin locked in the room. And Karen, from the back of the hallway, heard only one question echoing in her mind. What would they do with the truth, now that she's knocked on the door? The phone rang at 6:13 a.m. Karen was sitting on the floor of the maid's room, her eyes open for hours, even though she hadn't slept for a second. The sound of the cell phone seemed to pierce the skin. She answered without saying hello, as if she already knew what was coming. On the other side, Raphael's voice sounded low, hoarse, as if he too was carrying the weight of a lifetime. Karen, he is your son. The DNA gave 99.9% compatibility. The world stopped. Karen couldn't react immediately. He just let the cell phone slip out of his hand and fell to his knees, with his face between his hands, without making a sound. It was as if all the screams he had held for more than a year were now stuck in his throat, forming a knot that was impossible to loosen. That news, which seemed impossible, was also the only thing she had ever known. From the first moment she held Noah in her arms, and he was silent. From that deep look, that scar in the right place, that cry that only she could calm, the pain of grief and the joy of reunion exploded within her like two storms crashing. The son he had buried without seeing, without touching, without saying goodbye. He was alive. I had grown up, laughed, cried, without knowing that it existed. But Karen knew there was no time for excitement. No more. Because now she carried something powerful. The truth. And every truth, when it is not protected, becomes a target. He stood up. He changed his clothes. She placed the folded exam carefully inside a plastic folder and left in silence. Before any other employee woke up, he went straight to the mansion's laundry. There, among baskets of expensive clothes and the smell of bleach, he found Martha folding sheets with her usual precision. The older woman looked up, and seeing Karen's expression, stopped. "I know," Martha said before she said anything. Karen took a deep breath. The DNA was positive. "He is my son." Martha closed her eyes for a moment. "I saw when they brought the baby. I saw how Ethan walked into that hospital like a broken man and left with a baby in her arms. Robin was unconscious, full of tubes, full of blood. She lost everything. The uterus, the child, sanity. Ethan couldn't bear to bury him. And then you were there, on the same floor, on the same day. And the doctor, Duncan, he had been friends with Ethan since college." Karen sat next to her, her eyes filled with suppressed tears. "You know all this from the beginning. Why did I never say anything?" Martha was slow to answer. "Because I'm also a mother, and because I was also afraid. But now I see how hard you fought. And he recognized you, Karen. That baby. Recognized the lap of the one who begot." Martha got up, went to a toolbox in the back of the laundry room, and pulled out a thumb drive hidden under a false bottom. "I recorded this audio weeks after giving birth. Ethan came to talk to me. We're destroyed. I needed to let off steam. I thought it was wrong, but I recorded it for safety. Now it's yours." Karen held the object carefully, as if she were touching a gun and a key at the same time. "Did you hear what he said?" he asked. Martha nodded with tears in her eyes. "He said I took the baby from Latina. She won't even know what happened. It was better that way. At least he's going to have everything he needs." The phrase echoed in Karen's mind like thunder. Now she was no longer a suspect, nor intuition, nor an anonymous ticket. Now it was proof. That child had been torn from his arms by greed, selfishness, and fear. And all these years she has cleaned the floor of the woman who has usurped her most sacred right. But the war was just beginning. And she knew messing with the powerful is asking to be crushed. And yet she had no choice. Because when a mother finds out that her child has been stolen, she doesn't stop. She doesn't sleep. He does not back down. She fights. And if you're still here with me, listening to this story, know that the strongest moment is yet to come, because it is not enough to discover the truth. It is necessary to show it to the world, and who has a lot to hide. He will do everything to silence those who dare to speak. The sun gilded the gardens of the Whitmore mansion, as if there was nothing rotten behind the impeccably pruned walls. White tents fluttered in the light wind, waiters circled with trays of French champagne, and sophisticated laughter filled the air, everyone waiting for the long-awaited summer benefit tea, hosted by Robin Whitmore on behalf of the family's Children's Foundation. It was the kind of event that made the social columns melt in praise, with smiling politicians, attentive journalists, and an audience that confused charity with spectacle. But for Karen, that day wasn't about charity. It was about truth. She straightened her simple hair, tied it in a discreet bun, and put on her navy blue uniform with the same care as one who puts on armor. In his pocket, hidden under his apron, were the printed documents. The DNA test, the copy of the obstetrician's note, and the pen drive with Ethan's audio. Earlier, he had delivered everything, certified copies, into the hands of Raphael and a lawyer from the Latino borough of the Bronx, Dr. Lorena Cruz, an immigrant women's rights activist. The instructions were clear. If something happened to her, the files should go straight to the press. If I don't come back, let go of everything. Even if it hurts, even if it costs a lot. Raphael held her hand firmly. You're going to come back, but this time she's going to come back with him. Martha, dressed discreetly as usual, was already positioned near the main table in the garden. She controlled the sound, as she did at every event, and knew exactly which wire to pull when Karen was ready. Robin walked down the staircase of the mansion with Noah on her lap, dressed in white like a stained-glass saint. She smiled for the flashes, posed for cameras, kissed her son on the cheek while talking about maternal empathy and commitment to children in vulnerable situations. It was cynical, rehearsed, dazzling. Ethan next to him did not smile. He sweated under his light grey suit and looked away whenever Karen passed by. He knew, and increasingly it seemed that the weight of what he had done was breaking his shoulders. Karen, hiding behind the technical support tent, watched everything. Every false word, every pose, every clap of applause. This was more than an event. It was a farce. Her heart was beating so loudly that she could barely hear the speeches that followed. But when Robin announced the official closing of the ceremony and thanked everyone for attending, Karen walked to the side of the stage with firm steps. Martha made the sign. The microphone was released. Karen climbed the 3 steps with the same dignity she had carried since the day she buried her silence. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice sounded firm. Some people turned their faces, surprised by the presence of an employee on stage. Robin widened her eyes. Ethan stood up abruptly. "My name is Karen Alvarez," she began, and the side conversation ceased. "I have been working in this house as a cleaner for a little over a year, and today, in front of all of you, I am not here to speak as an employee. I'm here as a mother." A whisper ran through the audience. She held the papers firmly in her hands. "This baby, the same one that this lady holds as a trophy, he is my son, of blood, generated by me, and torn from me by a lie." Robin tried to move, but Ethan grabbed her arm. His eyes were locked on Karen, as if he finally recognized the abyss he had dug himself. Karen extended the DNA test. "Here is the proof, a test done by an independent laboratory. 99.9% compatibility between me and the boy. He is Miguel. The son I was told had died in childbirth." The audience froze. Karen continued, her voice breaking. "While I cried in the hospital, without being able to see my baby, this family forged documents, bribed doctors, and condemned me to eternal mourning, just so they could create a perfect heir." Robin let out a short, nervous laugh. "This is absurd. This woman is unstable. Someone get her off the stage." Karen didn't back down. "Unstable is someone who lies to cover up a crime. Unstable is the one who clings to a child who has not given birth, who has not breastfed, who has not felt growing inside himself." She turned to Ethan. "You know, you were there. It was you who ordered my son to be taken. It was you who condemned me to this hell." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat failed. His face, once haughty, was now only a shadow. The crowd was in shock. Reporters recorded. Cell phones raised. Greenwich's elite, accustomed to pretending that everything was perfect, now watched the raw truth drip down like stained wine on the white towel of the event. Karen looked at Noah, now in the arms of a babysitter, crying, confused by the tension around her. His little eyes were looking for something, or someone. And even after all of this, I'm still here, because a real mother doesn't run away. A mother fights, and I fought, every day, alone, in silence, invisible. Absolute silence took over the garden. It was as if the air had been sucked out of each lung. But before anyone could react, a security guard whispered something in Robin's ear. She turned pale. The family's lawyer got up from the table of honor and left in a hurry. Something was about to happen, something that no one there expected, and Karen felt it in her chest. Her courage lit a fire that could no longer be extinguished. But in a house where everything is a facade, how far will the owners of the secret go to protect the lie? The silence that dominated the garden exploded into overlapping voices as Karen finished her denunciation. But before the confusion took over, Robin stood up with red-hot eyes, like a cornered beast. She screamed with the assurance of someone who was never challenged. "Lie! All lies! This woman is crazy! An opportunist who wants what's mine!" The shrill sound echoed through the speakers and struck his ears like a razor. She advanced towards the babysitter who was holding Noah, but before she could reach him, Karen made an almost imperceptible gesture to Martha. The older woman, standing by the sound control desk, pressed a red button. The sound system has changed. Suddenly, audio began to play, clean, clear, and devastating. "I took the baby from Latina. She won't even know what happened. It was better that way. At least he will have everything he needs. The other died. You couldn't bury two dreams on the same day." The voice was Ethan's. The air was sucked out of the room. The talk ceased. The cell phones rose in unison. It was as if everyone knew that this moment could never be remade, that they were facing a historical truth, an injustice unearthed in the middle of a flowering garden. Robin turned pale, took 2 steps back, and then yelled, "Turn it off! This is illegal!" But it was too late. The recording was already running on dozens of cell phones. It was already echoing in the hearts. Ethan tried to pull the power cord from the soundboard, but a tall man in a black suit blocked his way. "I am a federal prosecutor. Touch anything else, and you're committing obstruction of justice." Karen, in the center of the chaos, remained motionless. The teary eyes fixed on Noah, who was now in the arms of the nanny, in shock from the screams and the commotion around. The child was crying, but when he saw Karen, he stretched his arms to her, as if instinctively recognizing the way back home. Karen walked calmly to him. She took him gently in her arms, and like the other times, he calmed down. Robin screamed uncontrollably, "He's mine! I created it, I breastfed, I took care of her when she wasn't." But no one believed it anymore. The images of the DNA test were already projected on a screen improvised by Martha. On the side, the technical report with 9% compatibility. A Greenwich Times reporter broadcast it all live. Local channels turned on the cameras. Social smiles became harsh faces of judgment. Ethan took 2 steps back, trying to escape, but he was again stopped, this time by 2 men in suits who introduced themselves as federal investigators. Karen, with Noah nestled on her chest, turned to the guests. Her voice was now low, but it carried the weight of all the silenced voices before her. "For more than a year, I mourned the body of a son who I was told was dead. I was buried with him. I buried my faith, my joy, my identity. And today, before you, I welcome my son back. But he is not a trophy. He is not an object. He is a stolen life, a life that resisted. And I also resisted." Tears flowed, but she didn't lower her eyes. not even when Robin tried to run towards him to snatch Noah from his arms. The security of the house intervened, holding the woman screaming, who kicked, roared, spat insults. "This monster didn't give birth. This monster wants to destroy me. I am his mother. I am." Karen squeezed her son tighter, protecting his head, as if she could shield him from all that poison. Noah whispered something softly in her ear. No one listened, but Karen listened. He said, "Mommy," and at that moment, everything around him was erased. The flashes, the screams, the journalists, the threats, nothing else mattered. She had her son back, but one detail still burned in the back of his mind. What else was buried behind that lie? How far had Ethan and Robin gone to hide the perfect crime? And more than that, who helped them in the hospital? Who signed the documents? Who profited from this baby swap? The answer was still hidden, and it smelled of rot coming from above. The days that followed the scandal were like a silent earthquake, whose tremors could still be felt long after the main quake. The morning after the charity event, headlines took over newspapers in New York, Connecticut, and soon after across the country. The image of Karen, hugging little Noah in the middle of a luxurious garden, was on the cover of the biggest portals. "Cleaning lady reveals that son was stolen by millionaire couple. The mother that money could not erase. Truth in DNA. Scandal in Greenwich." Ethan Whitmore was arrested that same morning, surrounded by federal agents, on charges of document fraud, misrepresentation, kidnapping of a minor and medical conspiracy. His lawyer tried to get a millionaire bail, but was denied. The prosecution used the recordings, documents and examinations to demonstrate the calculated coldness with which the plan had been executed. Robin, seeing her husband handcuffed and the spotlight turned on her, had a nervous breakdown and was admitted to a private psychiatric clinic. The Whitmore's empire, one of the most respected on the East Coast, crumbled by the hour. The hospital involved has entered a federal investigation. The archives of February 11th began to be combed through line by line. Evidence of other irregularities emerged: missing medical records, undeclared payments. Several professionals from the obstetric ward were removed. The name of the obstetrician who signed Miguel's death, Dr. Harold Duncan, became among the most wanted. He had disappeared days before the public complaint. Gone, without a trace. But justice moved. And the truth, now, was the wind that no one could contain. Karen, at the center of it all, turned down interviews, proposals from publishers, talk show invitations. He said no to documentaries and political campaigns. His answer was always the same. "I don't want fame. I want peace, and I want to raise my son with dignity." Even so, his image has traveled the country as a symbol of resistance. Movements in support of Latino immigrants began to use her story as a reference in speeches, marches, and public hearings. She became, without ever asking, a face of courage in the midst of the silence imposed on invisible women. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was different. Smaller, no cameras, with cold light and worn wooden benches. Karen sat with Noah next to her, wearing simple clothes, hair tied up. On the other side, expensive lawyers, papers, protocols, but no truth. When called to testify, she stood up serenely, held her son's hand, and said before the judge, "I don't ask for revenge. I just want the truth to win, and that no mother, no working and invisible woman goes through what I went through. May the womb of poverty stop being buried by the silence of the powerful." The judge stared at her. Silence. Then, in a firm voice, he said, "Legal and permanent custody of the minor, registered as Noah Whitmore, is granted to his biological mother, Karen Alvarez, with immediate effect. The court recognizes the crime of misappropriation of a minor and determines psychological monitoring for the child. This court deeply regrets what has been done, and it undertakes to continue investigating all those involved." Karen didn't cry there. He just shook Noah's hand tightly. He looked at her and said quietly, "Shall we go home, Mom?" She smiled. "There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because if you believe that a mother's love is stronger than any lie, you are in the right place. The months passed. The Whitmore mansion was sold to cover part of the legal costs. Robin remained hospitalized without the right to visits. Ethan was awaiting trial in a common cell. The hospital made headlines in new scandals, but Karen remained out of the spotlight. She moved with Noah to a simple apartment in Yonkers, where no one recognized her. She enrolled her son in a public school and returned to work part-time as a day laborer. But now it was by choice, not submission. Every Saturday, the two walked to the park where Karen was taking Miguel in her dreams. And there, among old trees and wooden benches, she would sit with Noah on her lap, tell stories and sing old songs in Spanish. It was a world of their own. But one afternoon, when he got home, he saw an envelope under the door. No sender. When she opened it, a single piece of paper, an old black and white photo of the birth at the Bronx hospital, and in the background, a woman in a lab coat that Karen had never seen, with his eyes fixed on the camera, and on the back of the image, a handwritten phrase, "It's not over yet." That morning, the sky over Queens was overcast, but there was a different light streaming through the window of the small apartment where Karen and Noah, now Miguel Noah, were starting again. The boxes were still piled up, the furniture was few, the living room rug was used, donated by a neighbor, but the smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the room with a tenderness that no mansion in Greenwich had ever known. Karen swept the floor in silence, in worn slippers and a baggy t-shirt, while the boy played with a red cart on the carpet. The television, turned on at low volume, showed a report on the Whitmore scandal, but she no longer listened. She was there, alive, standing, and with the child in his eyes. In the first days, Miguel Noah was surprised by the new rhythm. I missed the huge corridors, the white room, the expensive toys. But soon, he began to discover the magic of the little things, the smell of the wet street, the sound of the empanada seller on the corner, the branches of the trees banging against the window at night. Raphael, always present, helped as he could. He set up the boy's bed, installed the curtain, and on Sunday nights he showed up with soup made by his aunt, saying it was to warm the heart. Karen smiled. It helped, but without depending. Always with that silent pride of someone who learned to survive in the mute cry of cleaning. The nights were the most sacred time. After the shower, she would sit by the bed and start telling stories. But they were not fairy tales. They were memories. She talked about when she felt him move in her belly, the songs she sang softly during pregnancy, the promises she made in her thoughts. You don't know, my son, but even when they took you away from me, I kept loving you, every day, every second, and he listened, sometimes silent, sometimes with his eyes half closed, trying to hold back sleep. And in one of those moments, while she caressed his fine hair, he turned his face and said in a soft voice, "Mom, sing that song again." It froze. His hands fluttered on the sheet. It was the first time. "Mom." The word sounded as if the entire universe had stopped to listen to it. The tears came without warning, silent, and she kissed his forehead gently, as if time had given back everything it had taken. There are moments in life that seem small to the world, but are giant to those who live them. And maybe, if you're feeling something right now, watching this story, it's because deep inside, deep down, you also know that love, when it's real, always finds its way back, because there is pain that heals when it is recognized. And there is a new beginning that is only possible when the truth is stronger than fear. As the weeks went by, Karen created a new routine. She enrolled Miguel Noah in a community school, where he made Spanish-speaking friends like her. He decorated the refrigerator with crooked drawings, kept every paper he brought from class with the care of someone who keeps an inheritance. She planted basil in the kitchen window, sewed cushions with old fabrics, and little by little, that apartment became the home she always dreamed of. Simple, small, but full of life. One late afternoon, while Raphael helped the boy with his homework, Karen organized old papers. Among receipts, documents from the lawsuit, and letters from the lawyer, he found the DNA test folded inside an envelope. He read the percentage again, 99.9%. There, in that number, was the proof of everything. But she didn't need that role anymore. The bond between them was no longer just genetic. It was built, lived, watered with real affection. And then she burned him, in silence. He let the smoke rise through the window, as if he were giving to life what was now past. But when you opened the window, there she was, the woman in the photograph, stop across the street, white coat, hair up, sunglasses. The same face that appeared in the background in the birth photo. Karen froze. The woman stared at her, motionless, as if she wanted to be seen, and then he turned slowly and got into a black car. He disappeared among the cars on the avenue, leaving only one certainty in the air. If Karen thought it was all over, maybe she was wrong, because there are truths so deep that even when they are pulled out of the ground, they leave scattered roots. And sometimes, the biggest secret has not yet been told. What did that woman have to do with childbirth? Who sent it? And the scariest thing, what else was hidden in that hospital room on the night Miguel was born? The sun spread its golden rays over the lawn of Forest Park in Queens, painting the afternoon with a light that warmed not only the skin, but also the soul. Karen sat on a worn wooden bench, watching Miguel Noah run through the trees, his hair dancing in the wind, his laughter echoing like old familiar music. It was the same park where years ago she rocked him on her lap while still inside her belly, dreaming of a future that had been taken from her without warning. And now there he was, free, smiling, whole, as if time had decided to give him back everything that had been taken by force. She pressed her fingers over her shabby coat, taking a deep breath, trying to record every detail of that moment. The boy's feet kicking dry leaves, the shade of the trees dancing on the ground, the sweet smell of popcorn in the cart next to it. For the first time in a long time, Karen felt peace. And it was at that moment, between one memory and another, that Raphael emerged, with that calm walk, light linen shirt and a shy bouquet in his hands. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat next to her, looking at the boy, and after a brief silence, he spread the flowers with a serene smile. "It's Sunday, and you deserve flowers." She smiled, half awkwardly, half surprised. "I wasn't used to gestures like this, simple, sincere, without ulterior motives." She picked up the flowers carefully, as if they were too fragile for her pain-scarred story. "Thank you. Are beautiful." He nodded. "You too, even when you don't believe it." The words were suspended in the air, like petals loose in the wind. Karen looked away, staring at the horizon. It was hard to trust. It was difficult to lower his defenses after everything he had experienced, but in that shared silence there was something stronger than words, presence, the certainty that someone remained, even when the world collapsed. In the late afternoon, Raphael invited her to dinner. No rush, no commitment, just to laugh a little, eat something good, remember that life still has flavor. Karen hesitated, but Michael Noah, hearing dinner, ran up to them and shouted, "With pizza?" They both laughed, and Zoe, as someone who doesn't expect anything else from life, she accepted. The meetings became frequent. Raphael would take her to simple places, a Dominican restaurant that smelled of home food, an old movie theater that played classics in Spanish, or just walks around the neighborhood, hands in pockets and open hearts. Miguel Noah adored him. He called him Uncle Rafa, and made a point of showing each new drawing, each baby tooth that fell out. Karen, little by little, allowed herself to relax. The wrinkles on his forehead were smoothing, his gaze stopped fleeing. There were afternoons when she even forgot that she was once a woman who cried on her knees in a public hospital with no answers in her arms. One night, when she arrived home from one of these dates, Karen looked at herself in the mirror of the small living room. He saw there not only the cleaning lady, the mother, the survivor, but also the woman, The one who still knew how to love, who still wanted to be loved. He touched his own face gently, and in that instant a phrase echoed in his heart like an ancient whisper. Maybe life is giving me a second chance. It was then that everything inside her changed. She put her fear aside, and the following Sunday accepted Raphael's invitation to meet her family. The reception was warm, full of hugs, hearty dishes, and loud laughter. For the first time in years, Karen felt included, not as a maid, not as a victim, but as a part, like people, as someone who deserved to be there. One afternoon, as they walked through the park again, Raphael took her by the hand. His fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had been doing this all their lives. Miguel Noah ran ahead, laughing, throwing leaves in the air. Karen smiled. It wasn't a wide, exaggerated smile. It was a smile full of history, of those who know pain, but also know how to recognize love when it returns. And if you, who are here following every piece of this story, felt your heart beat differently now, it's because deep down you also believe that life can start over, that after so much struggle, happiness is not a luxury, it is a right. If this story spoke to you, if this piece of my life can become a hug for someone, help me to carry it forward. Like this video, subscribe here to the channel. And let's spread hope together to those who almost lost their faith. But just when everything seemed to finally fall into place, Karen received an unexpected call. A firm, feminine voice on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Karen Alvarez, we need to talk about what happened at Mount Grace Hospital in November 2 years ago. There's one more part of the story you need to know." Her heart raced. The voice sounded familiar, but it was distorted by the line. "Who are you?" she asked. The answer came with a dense silence, followed by a whisper. "I was in the operating room that night, and I wasn't the only one." The light passed through the stained glass windows of the small church in the Bronx, as if the sky itself were descending, little by little, to touch the shoulders of those who carried the weight of an unfair history. Karen walked slowly down the central aisle, with Miguel Noah in her arms, wearing a simple white dress, made of soft cotton, sewn by herself. Her steps were no longer those of servitude or fear, but of someone who overcame, and not by force, but by the silent faith of a woman who never gave up on love. The church, modest, with dark wood pews, and the smell of melted candles, was full, not crowds, but of presences that mattered. Raphael, in a beige suit and navy blue tie, waited at the altar, smiling with his eyes. He was the chosen godfather, not only of baptism, but of a new stage, of a new beginning built by many hands. Martha, sitting in the front row with her hands clasped together, wore a floral scarf around her neck and looked at Miguel Noah with grandmotherly tenderness. She risked everything, lost her job, her comfort, but gained something much greater, the chance to be part of a justice that rarely visits those who live in the shadows. The priest, a black man with a firm speech and a welcoming look, began the ceremony with words that seemed tailor-made for the occasion. "Today, we celebrate more than the baptism of a child. We celebrate the rebirth of a mother, of a boy, of a truth that resisted the deepest lies. We celebrate the power of love, courage, and faith that is not silent." Karen held her son in her arms. Miguel Noah wore a small white linen shirt and light dress pants. His dark eyes ran over each face curiously, but he didn't cry. He was calm, as if he knew that this was the right place, the right lap, the right life. When the priest asked her to approach the baptismal font, Karen took a deep breath and walked slowly. At every step, his memory brought flashes: the poorly conducted birth, the absence of answers, the cold hospital, the first time he held Noah without knowing that he was Miguel, the real public scream, the arms that welcomed him in the scandal. And now, there, everything finally found a new name: rebirth. The priest dipped his fingers in the water and traced the sign of the cross on the boy's forehead. "I baptize you, Miguel Noah Alvarez, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And then he poured the water over the child's head, while the choir sang a soft hymn, as if cradling not only that boy, but all those who sought consolation for their own losses. Karen closed her eyes, and in an almost imperceptible whisper said, "Thank you, my God. The Lord has given me back what they took from me." The water ran down her son's brown skin, cleaning more than his body, washing away the traces of a pain that could no longer fit in silence. In the audience, other mothers cried, women from the neighborhood, from the church, some who read the story in the newspapers and went to meet that woman who conquered the Whitmore Empire. Each tear was a gesture of recognition, a shared prayer. Raphael approached to hold the boy in his arms, and at that moment, Miguel Noah looked at him with a new glow. "Dad?" he asked quietly, as if testing a word he didn't know well yet. Raphael was moved. He did not answer with words. She just hugged him tightly. And in that embrace, Karen saw the promise of a new family forming. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. Children ran along the sidewalk, cars hurried by, but there, between simple flowers and suppressed laughter, there was a whole world starting anew. Karen walked down the steps of the church with Raphael by her side and Miguel Noah on her lap. Some people applauded her, others just smiled, but they all felt they were facing something rare, something that neither money nor power nor the best-kept secrets could prevent from flourishing. And even though everything seemed peaceful, there was something that still pulsated deep in Karen's chest. One detail, a loose thread, that call from the anonymous woman, the voice saying that she was not alone in the operating room. In the last few days, this came back in dreams, in disconnected memories. Someone knew better, someone was trying to speak, and now, in the empty sacristy, while he was putting away his son's backpack, a letter rested on the bench next to him, an envelope with no sender, addressed to her in the same handwriting as the old letter. "What you experienced was only part of the truth. What they took from you, it has not yet been fully returned." Today, Karen walks the lighted halls of the small community clinic in Queens with the same dignity as always, now wearing simple but clean clothes and holding a clipboard instead of a floorcloth. She is an administrative assistant, but above all else, she has become a silent guide for other immigrant women who arrive empty-handed and fear-filled. His name became a symbol of courage. His case transformed laws and reopened forgotten processes. But at home, when the silence of the night arrives, she remains just the mother who sits on the edge of the bed and watches Miguel Noah sleep. On the dresser, the photo of the reunion, she with him in her arms, still in her blue uniform, tears and hope mixed, is the last thing she sees before turning off the light. Because, deep down, all she needed was to feel the weight of her own child in her arms again. And when that happened, she understood. I was just a cleaning lady. But when I held that baby in my arms, I knew that the truth lived in my chest. And when we fight with faith, even the impossible returns to our arms. May this story touch your heart as it touched ours. And if somehow it brought strength or memory into your home, I thank you deeply for staying here. Your like is like a hug that warms and strengthens this channel. And if you want to come back for another coffee with us, sign up. The door is always open, right here in the comments of which city you are watching. We really want to know where this chain of stories is being born, and it activates the bell. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again, because there are still many stories like Karen's, hidden behind silent doors and silent voices, and we're going to tell them. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.